Hey guys, how are you doing? This is Zed from Zed Outdoors and I hope you're having an awesome day. So today I'm with Adam Ashworth of Ash and Iron in West Yorkshire, more specifically Leeds. Adam, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Nice to have you here.
Appreciate you having me. Now, if you're not familiar with Adam, Adam is a full-time professional knife and tool maker based here in West Yorkshire. He's becoming quite renowned within, in particular, the Sloyd, green woodworking, spoon carving community. And I'm fortunate now to spend some time with Adam here at his workshop. Now, in this particular video, what Adam is going to kindly demonstrate is his entire process for making and fitting a Sloyd knife handle. That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah, just about.
I'll be practicing that off camera, right, to make sure I nail it. Now, what we're going to do in this video, we're going to go through the entire process. And as you can see, this is quite a long video. That's because Adam is going to leave no stone unturned. So what Adam's speciality is actually making the blades themselves, as well as doing the handling. So what we're going to do first and foremost, straight after this segment, is we're going to have a quick chat with Adam a little bit about his background, so you get to know him as a maker. We're then going to look at some examples of the actual blades that he makes to give you kind of an idea of the variations that you can do, and then we're going to look at some examples of handles. We're then going to go ahead and actually proceed to actually make handles and attach them to the blades. And what Adam's going to hopefully do in this video is going to show a few variations of how to go about that, depending on kind of the equipment you have at home. Because obviously the idea with this video is to make it as accessible as possible for those of you watching at home. Obviously you're not all going to be fortunate to have loads of equipment like Adam does here in his workshop. So what Adam really wanted to do in this video, wants to do in this video, is to hopefully demonstrate a few techniques using some basic equipment you may have lying around at home, or at the very least are reasonably accessible. Now, a couple of things to mention before we get on with the meat and bones on this video. As I mentioned, this is quite a long video because there's a lot of information to cover. Now, to help facilitate that, what we've done, we've broken this video down into all the chapters. Now, if you scroll along the timeline of this video, you can see all the chapters marked out. Also, all the chapters are listed below in the description, just below this video. On the left-hand side are the corresponding times of the video. Now, YouTube has a very cool feature. If you click on those times, it will jump straight to that section without you having to manually scroll through. The other thing to mention is the blades that we're going to be demoing, talking through, and also using in this video, Adam makes himself, right? And they're readily available. So links to everything that will be shown in this video will be down below in the description, should you want to kind of access them and have a go yourself. Because the key thing is the intention, me and Adam has been speaking a lot about this video behind the scenes and in the build up to today, me meeting him. Now, what Adam's intention is to make this as accessible for you at home or wherever you are to kind of make your own Sloyd carving knife. And finally, what I'm gonna do is put links below to Adam's Instagram and obviously the main website itself, Ash and Iron. And on Instagram in particular, you can see the myriad of work that he gets up to. He teaches, runs demonstrations throughout the country and also abroad as well. And also he just does this full time, so you can see all the cool projects and work that he's getting up to. The final thing I will mention is the location of the workshop is actually on a very busy road, okay? So if you do hear traffic in the background and so forth, this is just the reality of how this workshop runs. So I do apologize in advance, but yeah, this is kind of the reality of the environment that Adam works in. Doesn't faze him, especially when he gets his power hammer going, right? But I just wanted to kind of mention that in advance. If you do kind of hear background noise, that's why. But hopefully it won't deter from obviously the meat and bones of this video. So Adam, with your kind permission, shall we begin?
Yeah, let's do it.
So guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of this video where Adam Ashworth of Ash and Iron is going to be teaching you how to make and fit a Sloyd knife handle. So Adam, before we begin the actual demonstration of what we're going to be doing in this video, I wanted to take a moment out to talk about you as a maker for those that are not familiar with your background. So would you take a moment out to talk a little bit about your background and your journey into what it is you do today?
Yeah, so always been crafty, and I always did woodworking from a fairly young age, and then from that got into green woodworking. And whilst I was going down the rabbit hole of green woodworking, found out about forging and blacksmithing from the tools. I found out about the likes of like Nick Westerman, and because it's such an intimate community, it allowed me to like actually talk to these people and get influenced by them and that then led to me kind of thinking what I wanted to do with my life, and then giving blacksmithing and grinding a little bit of a go. Before I was doing the forging, I was doing the grinding, because it's a little bit more accessible because you don't need a big forge and all of that. Because I was just doing it in the back garden with a little Sorby grinder at first. And then from then it's kind of just spiraled. I don't want to say out of control, but I think some people might say it's spiraled out of control. And yeah, it's eventually just led me to where I am today. But yeah, in summary, it's because of green woodworking that yeah, I am here.
And in terms of kind of what you do now then, so
Yeah.
you operate under the brand name Ash and Iron.
Yeah.
So what is your focus with Ash and Iron?
At the moment, it's straight Sloyd knives. It's what I've been trying to hone in on over the last few years. As I was starting out, I was making a few, and now I'm making more, I'm making them better, and now I'm getting to that point where, you know, I'm starting to think of what else I can do. But at the moment, yes, straight Sloyd knives for, yeah, green woodworking.
And so your focus at the moment, and obviously it's going to evolve as time goes on,
Yeah.
but your focus at the moment is to sell just the blades on their own that you've made, various styles of kind of Sloyd knives, as well as kind of completed ones with the handles. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, I think you took the words out of my mouth there, yeah.
And just kind of one thing with that, just to kind of wrap up on that, is this is something we've spoken about off camera and I've seen for myself, is you also just experiment with kind of your kind of reenactment style of knives, or
yeah.
Viking knives. So would you like to take a moment to talk about that as well?
Yeah, so one of my other interests when I was younger as well is reenactment. I don't do it so much anymore, but the interest for the historical side of it is still there. And a lot of the older stuff, people think that just because they didn't have electricity, it wasn't that talented and wasn't that skilled. No, 500 years ago, for example, like Tudor period or whatever, what they were knocking out was phenomenal, and I really like looking at what they were making and having a go at that, because yeah, it's a bit like green woodworking in terms of woodworking, because it's without power tools, all of that. It's a lot more labour intensive, a lot more technically challenging, and it's yeah, something I like going to now and again because it's fun, it looks cool what you make, and it's just a good use of skill. Because yeah, when you're in production work, like as I said, I do straight Sloyd knives, I'll do loads of them, but they all look the same. So once you've done lots, it's not that technically challenging anymore, so it's nice to set yourself a challenge, isn't it?
So Adam, we're going to start looking at your blades first and foremost. Where would you like to begin?
We'll start with the mini Sloyd. So yeah, all of these knives are a typical example of what I have on my website. These four here are forged, so they start from stock metal, forge them to shape, grind them to shape. And this is my mini Sloyd, which is since they're all forged, they all vary slightly, but they're about 40-45 mil long. With something this small, it's meant for control, less power since it's shorter, but more control, narrow as well. So it's good for tight transitions, spoon necks, small radii basically. But obviously you can't do all your carving with such a small knife because you don't get the leverage on it. So we'll go for something bigger. So this is the next size. This is my bread and butter really, what I make a lot of, which is the 90 mil. And this is a bit of an all-rounder really. You can do pretty much all your carving with one of these. Yeah, it's still got the narrow tip at the point, good for getting into radii, but it's also got quite that big length, big body, good for good strong planing cuts, things like that. And yeah, this is your 90mm. The next step up is your 100mm. The main reason I was doing 100mm, because I used to do just 90, and then lots of people asked me for a 4" or 100mm knife. So I was like, okay, then if you want it, I'll make it. So yeah, it does all the same things that your 90mm one does, but it's just that fraction bit longer. One thing that people have said about having the longer blade is it's good for going over the surface of like spoon bowls or even bigger bowls, because it's so wide you can get both lips in one cut. So it's nice and even. The next one is the facets one, which comes from a reenactment angle, because a lot of blades for reenactment are made to a reenactment quality, so usually they're not super suitable for green woodworking. So my thinking was, if I make a blade suitable for reenacting, but it also works well in covering both bases there. So yeah, this is called a seax. A seax is an Anglo-Saxon word for knife, basically. So all of these really are seaxes, but in today's day, this kind of shape with that curved clip point is yeah, kind of regarded as a seax, and it's very like Viking knife. So yeah, this shape is very common. I'm not entirely sure why they made them this shape, they just did. But I found for woodworking you still get your fine point there, but also quite a wide blade there, which is quite nice and strong. I suppose one reason why they did it is back in the day they'd been making these like raw iron with a tool steel edge. Raw iron is a bit soft, so by having it so wide it would make it quite strong. If it was like narrow and tapered like my other blades, the blades could probably bend and break. So having them wide with only a narrow tip would give it some strength. But today, with today's steels, it's not so necessary. And then yes, the final one is my laser cut blade. So this isn't forged. I get them laser cut, but it's still ground by me, heat treated by me. And yeah, this is 100mm. So the profile, the uses, all of that, the same as the forged ones, they're just manufactured differently. And yeah, that's just basically an example of what I have available typically on my website in regards to blade only.
So just one question I have for you,
Yeah.
and this is maybe a question those that are watching may have, is what is the difference in terms of pros and cons with the forge and the laser cut?
I'd say the main pro is the cost, because as I said, since I'm not forging them, I'm getting them laser cut, it makes them more cheaper for me to make and therefore cheaper for me to sell. Honestly, I'm not sure there are really any other, there's not really any cons.
So basically, just because of the manufacturing process with a laser cut,
Yeah.
It becomes more cost effective for you, but then
Yeah.
you're able to pass on those cost savings to the consumer.
Yeah. One other difference is that since the laser cut, it's sheet steel, so it's the thickness throughout the blade is consistent, whereas with my forged ones, they have a distill taper, so they get narrower towards the tip, which means the bevels are shorter, which means for going around tight radii. So you can kind of see in the bevels here, the bevels on the laser cut towards the tip are quite wide, whereas on the forged ones they're quite narrow. These still work for your tight radii, but this one will go around an even tighter radii. Or radius, sorry.
And in terms of the final question then, what blade are we going to be working with today?
We'll be using the laser ones because it's what I have available, and also the tangs on the forged ones are all a bit different. if we're using the laser ones and someone gets the laser one and wants to put a handle on it, the process what I'm going to do today will be exactly the same to someone who gets a laser one and does it at home. I mean, it's going to be the same with the forged ones, but it will be exactly the same with the laser one.
So now we're going to start talking about handles. Okay, so where would you like to begin in talking about some examples you have in front of us?
Well, we'll start with what's closest to me. So here we have 2 mini sloids. Now, people familiar with my work might recognise that I typically go for stacked handles, because I make mine with a belt grinder. So very fast course abrasives really, and that means the grain can be going any which way really. It's not like when you're using a knife that you've got to follow the grain, because if you're doing a stacked handle with a knife finish, there's likelihood that you're going to tear out the grain and pop off what you've glued on, but not in this case. So what I have here is a stacked one, which is some purple heart and some maple, and then a non-stacked one, which is pear. Sorry. This is what, if you've not got abrasives at home, what you might be going for with a knife finish. What kind of shape that I typically go for is one that follows the contours of the blade really, so you extend that edge down into the handle and extend the back down into the handle, and then there's a slight taper on it that way as well, and then finished it off with facets and a nice rounded edge. And I basically just apply that to all my other handles, but as the blade gets bigger, so does the handle. So this is a 70mm blade with some curly birch and some purple heart. Again, just following the blade, but this time, since it's a bit of a bigger blade, bigger handle. Because the thing is, with smaller blades as well, it's quite nice to have something that'll like completely fit in your hand, so you can just gives you some more agility with the knife really. With something quite this big, you lose that agility, but you've got more to grab onto, so it allows you to get that power into it, but you can't really like hold it in your fingers or whatever, whereas with something smaller you can, and it's, yeah. So this is a 100mm blade with a purple heart, oak and walnut. Again, all stacked, similar to these three, where it's just following the blade. And yeah, this is a great example of what I typically do. The next one is one of my seaxes, which, yeah, you might notice that it doesn't really have a straight back, or on the blade is a bit different, so usually I just use the tip and draw a line from there to the edge of the bevel down there, that way, and from there to the back of a knife. Those usually have construction lines, and again, just a slight taper in that way. This is, I believe, yeah, this is the birch, walnut and oak. And then we get on to the other knives. So this is my blade, but the handle is made by Sean Warburton. And this is all done by knife. And yeah, you can see from doing it with a knife, you can get a bit more contours. So one reason that mine are all straight, because I use a flat platen on my belt grinder to do it, and with that you can either do straight or convex shapes. You can't really do concave shapes very well, but as long as the grain allows it, that doesn't really apply to knife finished handles. So yeah, that's what Sean's done here. It's got some nice contours, lots of nice facets on it as well. And because it's knife finished, it's nice and shiny as well. Because if you want a shiny finish with something done with abrasives, you've got to go up through the grits, and it's a bit of a faff. Whereas knife finish, everyone knows this already from your woodwork. The spoon carving, there's nice finish straight away from the knife. And then the final one here is something that I've only recently started doing really, and this is a full tang blade. So you'll be able to see from the spine, the metal of the knife follows the shape of the handle entirely, and the handle is 2 pieces glued on either side with 2 pins put through it. This is more typical of your like bushcrafty knife, because you've got the tang so large, it gives it a lot of strength. Like you can whack it with a hammer or whatever. You want a maul, something soft, not an actual steel hammer. Yeah, this is my full tang blade, which is a bit of a hybrid between a bushcraft knife. It's got the same bevel as my Sloyd knives, but the tip's a bit wider, the blade's a bit wider, and yeah, the handle's a bit shorter and heavier as well, since it's got the full blade. Oh, it had tang in it. And yeah, this a good summary of the kind of handle blades that I have available on my website most of the time.
So for the purposes of today's video, what style of handle are you going to be demonstrating?
We'll be doing a handle this shape, but from one piece of ash that I have. So that's something else to bear in mind, is when it comes to making handles and selecting timber, is if you're using a belt grinder or rasp or whatever, not knife, it doesn't really matter what timbers you're using, how hard they are, what grain orientation, all of that. If you're using a knife, then you wouldn't want to go for something like kiln dried purple heart, because it would be a lot of effort. You can do it, but it wouldn't be as easy as, say, air dried ash, which is nice. It draw knives really nicely and gives you a nice finish. So that's why we're going to be making the one by hand with that one. And yeah, that'll be one piece. It won't be stacked because we'll be doing it by hand with knives. And if we put some wood on top of it, likelihood is it'll just pop off with a draw knife. Right. So this is what I would make my first choice in making a handle from hand tool finish with. It's some ash. I felled it and split it just over a year ago, so it's probably not bone dry yet, but the thing is with ash, or any wood really, if it's completely dry and you're using hand tools on it, it's not a fun time. And if it's just one piece of wood, like you're not stacking it, if it shrinks and moves just a tiny bit, because this is fairly dry, but not completely, but it's dry enough that any movement it has isn't gonna be drastic. So it's dry enough for what we want, and also still, I suppose, green enough to work nicely with hand tools. So yeah, from the split log, what I've done is just planed it a little bit. You don't need to go to town. The reason why this is planed so much is I recently bought a new jointer plane and went to town on this bit of ash. So this is perhaps a bit overkill, but you want at least one flat surface on it, so for when you put your knife in it, you can see, or you can draw construction lines on it and build off of that. If it's all split, you can't draw on it, and it's very hard to visualize your handle in there. So it's just useful to get it a bit more standardized and flatter, and you can then see like the cross section of your wood, see what you're playing with, see if it's big enough. So yeah, what I've got here is 15 centimeters long by probably 3 by 6 centimeters, which I think up here is a little bit on getting closer to the small side for handles, and you're probably looking at that thinking, God, that's huge. Of course you can make a handle from that, and I won't deny that, but if you start off with something bigger, drill your hole, put your knife in it, if your knife goes in slightly wonky or not quite as it wanted to go in, if you start with a bigger piece of wood, it just gives you that little bit of wiggle room to correct for it. If you start with something which is more or less exactly the right size of your knife and you drill your hole and fit it, and it goes wrong, then you're going to have to scrap your handle. So it's good to start with something a little bit oversized just to give you that wiggle room and that comfort, so if anything does go wrong, you've got it. So the woods that I typically use in my handles, I buy kiln dried, and they're good for using belt grinders on, files, rasps, things like that. Using hand tools, knives, planes, things like that probably gets a bit more challenging. But what I regularly like using, I've got, that is some maple. Behind it I've got a slab of yew, London plane, more yew, ash. I think this is probably European oak as opposed to American. Iroko, which is a bit of an odd choice. It's usually used for cladding outside because it is rot resistant, but and because of that people sell a lot of it for construction, but I saw it, thought it looks pretty and used it. But like a lot of the woods I use, the dust on it is pretty toxic. So if you are using rasps, files, belt grinders, it's important that you've got good ventilation and or respiration, like face masks, something like that, because you don't want to be breathing in the dust. I also use bog oak. This is some English elm, I think. Some curly maple, some pear. Pear is really good because it's a really dense wood. It'll give you a good knife finish. Something like birch might be a really nice soft wood, easy to carve, but it'll give you quite a soft finish, and if you drop it, like, you're likely to dent it, or the handle will get damaged easily, whereas if you're using something hard like pear, not going to happen. I also like to use purple heart padauk a lot. A lot of pretty woods basically, and yeah, ash is also a good one. However, the thing I've found is kiln dried ash tends to be really brittle. The ash that I have has all been air dried, which makes, I've been told the best ash is air dried and then kiln dried. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I have found from my own experience, kiln dried ash is just awful. I really don't like working it, especially with a knife. It's just about alright on a belt grinder, but then it's too brittle and it just breaks. But air dried stuff is, I don't want to say soft, but softer, a bit springier, and just really pleasant to work if the grain's right. It still tears out a little bit if it's grains all over. But yeah, and thinking about grain, that's something else to consider. Most of my knife handles, if not all, done on the belt grinder. It doesn't matter which way the grain is going, the belt grinder just eats through it. If you're using knives, you've got to be very conscious of the grain direction. It's a lot like spoon carving. If you know spoon carving, then you know, aware of grain direction, you've got to get it right, and the grain has to be going the same way that you want your shape in your handle to be, really, otherwise you're just going to be fighting it. And it was something so small, unless you've got a big vise to hold it in, it's just going to be, even if you do have a big vise, to be honest, it's going to be a fight if the grain's all over. So nice straight clean grain wood is important. But if you want to put bills and pretty bits of wood in it, then you can't be using knives, you've got to be using belt grinders, rasps, files, sandpaper, things like that. And And yeah, there we are. So my preferred method of fitting a knife to a handle is burning it in. However, a lot of people don't have the equipment because it needs like a decent blowtorch, and there's a lot of hesitation from people doing it that method because you've got to get this end of your tang really hot, and you don't want that heat bleeding from your tang into the blade because you'll ruin the temper. Because if you got the blade too hot, and you can see the temper colours going through, so there's all sorts of different colours. If you see any of those in the blade, that means it's going to go softer and it won't hold an edge as well. So basically, you don't want that heat bleeding into your blade. You want it in the tang. If you burn it in right, that never happens. If you get used to it, do it lots, it never happens. But for your first time, I can understand the trepidation of doing it. So one way around that is using the split dowel method, and that is by getting yourself a dowel which is just a bit longer than your tang of your knife, and sawing a gap the length of your tang, and it just fits in there like that. And it's important that it's also the same width as your tang. You don't want it like poking out or whatever. You want your tang to be completely in there, and that way it fits in there, and you can drill. This is a 9mm dowel, for example. You can drill a 9mm hole in your handle, and this will fit nice and tightly in there. You don't want, for example, just to drill a big hole and then bung your knife in there, because you get a loader gap that you're going to have to fill up with glue, and it doesn't really help when it comes to shaping your handle, because every time you put your knife in and out of there, it's going to waggle about. It's going to be in a different position every time, which doesn't help with your consistency, and it won't help when it comes to gluing it up, because you could shape it up, glue your knife handle in there, and then it goes off crooked like that until you get a wonky knife handle. You don't get that when you burn it in, because it fits exactly to your blade, but with this split tang method it fits fairly tightly if you drill it, if you saw it right. And the way that I have got this split dowel is, yeah, you can get your dowel, put it in your vise and saw it, but since it's quite thin, there's a good chance of splitting it. So I made this jig for doing this, which is just a bit of wood with a hole the diameter of my dowel drilled in, or well, almost all the way, and then a smaller diameter hole so I can like chuck a drill bit in there. So once I've put my dowel in there, if it gets stuck, I can just poke it out like that. But yeah, the way that I do it is put your dowel in there, and you'll notice that there's slots either side, which the way that I've sawn in that gap, here I've got 2 jigsaw blades. I think ideally I'd use 2 hacksaw blades, but this is what I had to hand today. I'd use 2 hacksaws just because they're longer and the stroke of the cut would be longer. But you can see I can, yeah, if I put this in the vise and we can get this started, excuse me, and then I can just get that started.
And worth explaining, why 2 hacksaw blades? Is that to mimic the thickness of the tang?
Yes, nail on the head there. Yeah, if I was to use like this saw, for example, you can see that the thickness compared to the tang is, well, obviously this is the teeth have been set out, so the kerf will be a bit wider than the sword, but still the kerf won't be as wide as a tang. Whereas 2 jigsaw blades or 2 hacksaw blades, these will be exactly, you want them just a hair over the width of your tang. But yeah.
So basically, when people are doing this at home, they just want to cut the thickness of the tang, basically.
Pretty much, you want your tang to fit almost perfectly, or anyway, you can see how I'm not struggling to put it in. The dowel is not really splaying out. Well, it is just fractionally, but not considerably enough to split the dowel. Yeah, the other thing to point out, the reason it's a bit longer is you get that little connecting bit of timber to hold it together at the end. So you don't want it fractionally. I'd say a good 15-20 mil. Yeah, you don't want to be wasting a load of dowel, but obviously also you don't want it so short that there's nothing holding these two bits together that you just yeah, break it in two. And yeah, so I've just started sawing this out. I'm not going to do it all because we'll be here all day. And then yeah, I'll poke it out, and you can see that yeah, there's a little saw mark, and because of this jig, so yeah, I've sawn in line with the hole, which is just going to act as a guide for my jigsaw, hacksaw blades, whatever. And it's also going to support the wood and stop it from breaking, really, because when you're sawing, you're not just applying force backwards and forwards, are you? You're probably putting a lot of side-to-side force, and you probably just snap it off. And yeah, you want to saw your gap all the way the length of the tang, and I've got it so it just matches up with yeah, the back of the blade. So when it goes in your handle, it's just going to be the dowel isn't going to be sitting proud or flush. It's going at all, or underneath it is going to be flush. And so when I fill it with glue, I'm not going to be wasting a load of glue, and it's going to look nice. As for your dowel timber, it doesn't really matter what it is. I'd suspect a hardwood would be better than something like pine, because it would just be less likely to break when you're sawing it. But because you're sawing it in a supported jig like that, it wouldn't matter. You could, if you're using a dark wood like walnut for your handle, get walnut dowels, or well, yeah, oak dowels for an oak handle, just so it hides itself a little bit better. But you don't have to do that, because no one's really going to care what it looks like except you, really. So yeah, you can see now I've yeah, you can see the hole I drilled is a bit wonky, but there's a lot less of that slop in there now. It still rotates, obviously, but there's none of the back and forth, none of the side to side as there would be if you just put it direct in the hole like that. So I think this is the method I always recommend to people when they say they don't like burning in, just because it's I think the next best thing after burning in terms of your blade is always going to register in the same spot, more or less, in your knife handle. So yeah, if it doesn't register in the same spot, it's just going to make your life not fun. So the next step is drilling your hole in your handle for your dowel. Obviously, you don't want your dowel hole to be too long, otherwise you're going to lose your dowel, nor do you want it too short, otherwise your tang will be sticking out. So what I've done here is just marked up the length of my dowel on my drill bit with a bit of masking tape, so it just gives me a visual of when my hole is the right length. I'm using drill press here because it's more accurate, more square. I can see everything whilst I'm drilling it. If you don't have one of those, which I think most people don't, you can use your normal drill, and then one way I was doing it, so you start drilling your hole, and then if you just turn it every so often, it allows you to, and then you can spin it like that, and if it doesn't feel balanced, you'll be able to tell that you've gone off. There we are. it's important as well to clear the swarf. The swarf of the bits of wood that's coming out of it will affect how true your hole is. So every so often you want to just making sure you're getting that swarf out of it. It's pretty straight. Again, if we're using a bigger bit of wood here, doesn't matter if your hole isn't dead straight, because we can rectify that when it comes to shaping it. Yeah. Just a little bit of wobble, but I think that's alright. So yeah, that's how we're doing it with a hand drill, but obviously if you've got a drill press, it's a bit easier. So I've sighted it, took my, well, it's not a square piece of wood, so taking the square to it isn't going to be enormously helpful, but just making sure that I am drilling as straight as I can. I've centre punched it as well, so my drill doesn't wander. And just take it nice and slowly. Same as when I was using the drill of a cordless. Making sure that swarf is cleared out. The drill's bottoming out, so I'm just very carefully going to wind the table up. Right, there we are. And before I take it out of that, I'm going to fan my dowel. And hopefully it's just going to fit in nice and well, yeah, we're what, 2mm proud there. Yeah, so it's not stuck in there, but just don't have enough to grab with my fingers. So I'm just going to drill it out a little bit more. The drill, that's me. Right, getting the sawdust out of there, and then yeah, there we are. It just fits nicely in there, and my blade now fits in there pretty tightly, almost as if it was burnt in. Really, it's got a little bit of play, but nothing to be fussy about really. And yeah, we're ready now to start shaping it. So now we have our knife and dowel fitted to our handle.
And when you say fitted, it's just loosely put in?
Yeah, it's not glued in. Yeah, this is something else. We don't want to glue it in just yet, because if you glue it in now and want to shape your handle, you run a very high risk of like damaging your edge, or yeah, like you could drop it, you could hit it with a draw knife or whatever, and because you're working it, you could injure yourself as well. So it's a very good idea to not have your knife blade permanently affixed in the handle whilst you're shaping it. And yeah, as I said, since we've got the dowel in it, it's now fairly solid where it's located. And yeah, what I'm now going to do is just have a look at it, decide which way it goes in best.
And when you say decide, what's making you decide which way is best? What are you looking at?
Which ways it flows. So the way that I draw my construction lines is, as described, I'll put my ruler on it, on the front edge and the back edge, and before I put the ruler on it, I'm just having a look at which ways those flow, and that seems alright. So what I'm just going to do now...
And just one thing I think to talk about is the ruler that you're using.
Yeah, so I just like using clear, flexible rulers just because you can see through it. And cause, yeah, I can see the blade underneath it. I can make sure I am aligned, because if I couldn't see that ruler, I could be like well over it. That's massive exaggeration, but it just helps eliminate any of these inaccuracies. And then I'm just going to draw a line there.
And using a Sharpie pen, is that what you use for this initial shaping?
Yeah, whilst the handle is still oversized, you can use Sharpie, but the thing with Sharpie is that the ink will bleed into the wood. So the smaller and closer to final shape your handle gets, you want to ditch your Sharpies, otherwise you're going to get lots of, well, black ink in your handle. But for now it's okay because we're quite oversized. And yeah, these aren't... These lines, if I don't like them, I don't have to follow them exactly. They're just a good visualization for when I'm drawknifing, and I can, yeah, just use them as a guideline. And so yeah, I'm going to have a look down them now. And yeah, I think I just want to maybe have another go, but it's important to notice that it's going to be different because it's not fixed in, not burnt. With the burnt in, every time you put your blade in, it's going to go in the exact same spot every time. Because we've got this dowel, it can rotate, and because of that, it's going to be different every time. So you've got to be conscious of that. And in fact, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find exactly where I want it, and just put a little mark, not close to it because that's going to be on the final handle, but put a little mark like there, just so I know which way it's meant to go. The other thing to bear in mind is like that, if I'm putting it on the table like that, I don't want to leave it like that. You always want to either take the blade out or just leave it pointing away. Just, you don't want to be like coming in here, trip up and face plant a sharp knife, do you? So yeah, I'm just going to have another look at that. I think I might want to kick that out just a little bit more. Again. So just a little bit more. Like that. And then, yeah. Not that I'm going to be doing this straight away, but I like to cut my handles to 13 centimetres. But if I just imagine what that's going to look like, I think that's alright. So yeah, the next step now is to take it to the Drawknife. So I'm just now, in retrospect, I've got my ruler put against the blade, so I'm parallel with it. I'm just going to mark lines, careful that my face is above the point, my hand's near the blade, all of that. Since it's pencil, it's going to come out easily, it's not noticeable, so you can go a bit closer. And this line now means I've got the same register all the time, and I can put a square to it, I keep nice and parallel with it. And yeah, it's not in the centre of the blade, it's important to keep that in mind, but it is parallel to the blade, which is important. So yeah, now I've got the blade out, I can start drawknifing it to shape. For that, I'm using my Shavehorse. I think it's, well, the design is heavily inspired, let's say, by Dave Fisher's Bowl Horse. I don't think I've made many alterations to it. It's a very heavy duty thing, it's super adjustable. This one also comes down a bit, like that comes off. Faces are covered in leather, and what I really like about it is that the pivot point for the head of it that moves is really high up, that means you get an incredible amount of leverage. So I just need to rest my feet on this, and this is really solid. Like it's not going anywhere, which for draw knifing is perfect. Because you don't really want to be applying a lot of pressure with your feet, because then you're concentrating on that rather than your knife handle. And
I think an obvious thing to state that obviously a lot of people won't have a shave horse.
No.
You're just using this because you got it to hand, but obviously people would just use knife grips and so forth, whatever they have to hand.
I would strongly recommend putting it in some sort of vise, because it's so small. Holding it, and dry hardwood as well, trying to carve hard dry wood with like a knife, it's going to be quite the struggle. So you can either, this is my preferred method, but failing that, you could put it in just a normal vise. Just be careful, since most vices are made out of metal, that if you're using a draw knife, you don't want to be clattering your vise all over with that. Or you can use abrasives like your files or whatever. That gives you a bit more control. So yeah, what you can't see is I've looked at which way the grain. So in fact, if we go this way, I can see that the grain is straight there. So I can make this cut come in towards me, and hopefully there's no secret knots. And I'm just going to start taking off the corners and then the middle, rather than trying to take it all off in one cut. If I take it all off in one cut, it's going to give me a headache. And I'm working down this end. Being very cautious, don't want to take too much off. I'm trying to get it all to meet off here, and then once it's an even thickness, then I can start taking nice even passes. At the moment it's a bit all over the place. In fact, why don't I, because you can see how it's not gripping. This has two holes in it as well, so you can make micro adjustments rather than just the macro ones. And that hopefully, yeah, that's a lot more solid now. So yeah, you can see that it's giving me a bit of a hard time doing this. And I'm also looking at that line. I can make sure I'm keeping perpendicular to it at this point. Just, you don't want to take a load of material off, and if you didn't have that line, you could be skew-iff to the blade. So construction lines, making everything square is fairly important, especially when you're just starting out. So yeah, the grain's a bit fiddly around here, I think. Not unworkable, but right there. And now we've got that side done. We're going to jump over, and start on the other side. So the other thing to bear in mind is, as you're shaping your handle, the surface area, the contact area is getting smaller. That's if you're using something like this, and by contact area I mean that bit. You can see how it's getting shorter already. So it's, yeah, you've got to be careful about how you're gripping it, and it's probably going to want to jump about a bit. Oops. So yeah, it's been a lot nicer to me than the other side, because this we're not on going down grain, we're going downhill on the grain, which is, well, very nice for carving. And yeah, I'm holding the draw knife at an angle. It's a lot like when you're using a plane. You don't usually typically use a plane straight, do you? You use it at an angle. So you're introducing the blade at an angle, just a bit nicer. And yeah, as you see, since this is going to be effectively waste, I am trying to follow the line up there, but it doesn't matter amazingly up there. So like I can, rather than trying to come in right up there, I can begin the cut like on here where it's easier to do it. So we're getting close to that line now, so I want to take nice long cuts, and I'm going to have a look, make sure it's square. All the marks we put on it have come off now thanks to the leather, but we can, now we've got the back square, we can make the front square to the back. So as long as that's happening, we're all good. So just being careful here. I think, yeah, just a little bit more off. And I am going into this, but that's just, it's a bit like when you run in a race, you don't slow down before the finish line, you're running past the finish line. Because I don't want to stop there, I want to keep the power going through so I get a nice straight cut. So yeah, looking at that line now, it's just got a little bit of a high spot here. And as I said before, it doesn't matter getting exactly to the line, it's more important that you parallel with the line, and then you can put your blade back in and see, especially if you look at it from the other side, you can see, and yeah, there is a bit of a high spot there which just wants to come off just a little bit. I'll take that out as well. And if you're using Drawknife, in fact, no, if you get your ruler, you can put it on the top and look down and just see, like, yeah, it's a bit rocky there, but flat there. It doesn't matter so much like up here because you're going to shave that off. You're looking more in the central and at the bottom. And yeah, now I've got that done. Well, almost done. Just get it a bit flatter. But the other thing is, once it's close to shape and you're putting facets on, you can swap to your spoke shave, be less aggressive, and give you a nicer, flatter finish. Yeah, that looks all right. So, having a look down. So, once you're happy with like the side profile of it, which I think that's alright, what I'm going to do now is take it back to a flat surface and mark on the construction lines. So, my blade is in there now. I've lined up my edge of the ruler with the edge of the blade, and I'm just going to draw a pencil, or you can use a biro, and I'm going to look down it from both ends to make sure that I've got it right, which I have. And now you're going to put that taper in it. So I like at the end it to be 20 mil, so 10 either side, and then I'll measure out 13, which is there, and at that end I'm going to put 12 on that side, 12 on that side, and we don't need the knife in it anymore, so just to be safe, take it out, and then we can very carefully line those up. Making sure it looks all right. Got that taper in it, and yeah, it's back to the Drawknife now, keeping perpendicular to your initial Drawknife lines on it. So yeah, let's get on that. So this is where it gets a bit more accurate, or no, a bit more precise, sorry. So you do want to be careful taking light cuts. And if the wood starts to fight you, there's no shame in like switching to something like a file or coarse sandpaper. Like if there's a bit of curly grain there, for example, you're never going to get a good finish with your knife in it. And like this being ash, if there was a wave, when I would be shaving it, it would pull it out and I'd get a divot there. The only way around that is by having really sharp tools and a lot of skill, or you just take a file to it. And for a lot of people out there who are new to this, perhaps that's going to be easier than trying to work around it. Yeah, just going to work to those pencil lines. I'm not super bothered about the surface finish just yet. That can all be dealt with later. Chicken foot squareness. Bit more. That's that side done. So another way of getting, well, if you're doing a straight handle like mine, getting dead straight facets might be a bit difficult with a draw knife. So another way is putting it in a vise, holding it with something soft as well. Well, I'm using an old leather welding gauntlet here. Soft jaws made out of wood would probably be better here, but I ain't got those here. Just so you can grip it better and you're not going to mark your wood as much. And yeah, I'm just going to take some of those high spots off with my plane now. I'm not really a plane expert, but I'm pretty sure any planes, like your typical number 4, there you are, is going to work. Oh, don't want to whack your camera there. Yeah, so yeah, the downside about using the leather glove is that I'm trying to be cautious with it, is that it can be a bit loose, so you've just got to be careful, take your time. And yeah, it doesn't seem like I'm taking an awful lot off, and I'm not. So I don't want the wood to tear out, and I don't want to take too much off, because you can take wood off, you can't put it back on. So just be nice and cautious. And this is just going to help establish that nice flat surface ready for the next stage. Looking. So yeah, still looking at the construction lines, because at this point, this is where it can start going wonky if you're not doing it right. But back to forth is less noticeable, but the sides, if you don't get the sides right, then it is quite noticeable if your blade's wonky. So. Right. So it's now been roughed in on 4 sides. It's important now to, whichever way you want it facing, you've taken off those construction lines. So what I've also done on the base, since we're going to be cutting the base off at an angle, this is too long at the moment, I've just drawn a little arrow in the direction that the blade is facing, just so I can keep track of what's happening. So now I'm going to take it out and we're going to put the facets on. So I like to use calipers and get it zeroed and set. For this style of handle I choose about 5.6. It doesn't have to be bang on 5.6 millimeters, but and then just lightly score. If you score too heavily, those marks are going to go quite deeply into your handle, and you're going to be fighting to get rid of them. And don't feel like you have to stick to 5.6mm, because the thing is, as it tapers, your facets are quite small looking up here, but up there they'll look very big. So you could put tapered facets on if you're feeling, or just adjust the size of your facets to match. And once those are scored in, I'm going to take a biro or a pencil, get it in the light so I can see it, and then just, since you've scored it, your pen should just follow. And it doesn't have to be perfectly all there, you just need enough that you can see it and it can guide you when you're drawing it. Helps if your pen works as well. I might try the pencil for the rest. If you can work with your light source so you get it in the shadows, it's going to be a bit difficult for you to see it and me, but if you get it in the light you can see the little scratch mark left by the calipers. You also could use that proper a marking gauge which carpenters use. If you've got one of those, that'd be better. You can also do the other trick of using your fingers as a stop and going like that. But if you actually measure and mark it out, that works better. So I've got it all marked out now, and now I'm going to take my spoke shave. You can use a Drawknife for this, but it might be a bit aggressive and you'll get a nicer finish with a spoke shave.
And once again, people use whatever tools they have.
Yeah, so one alternative is just a sloyd knife, although if you're making a sloyd knife handle you might not have one, but so yeah, just nice and steadily, and taking one long pass from there to the end to get a nice consistent finish and nice long shavings. And those marks are just going to act as a guide. I don't have to follow them exactly. They're just a good reminder of what it should be looking like. So the other thing is that if you've got a knife finish on your handle, it's not going to be perfectly flat, which means when you're drawing out those lines, they're going to follow the contours of the surface. So I can tell that these facet lines aren't super crisp, but it doesn't matter.
So you're going down enough so the two lines meet, basically?
Pretty much, yeah. And you can tell from your shavings, watching them coming out, you can see where you're hitting and where you're not. If you have high spots or, yeah. So as I said, you can use your Drawknife for this, sloyd knife, but your spoke shave is going to give you most control and a really nice crisp finish. And then just a few final passes there, feeling it, looking at it, seeing if there's any facets that don't need to be there, and then just taking a few final passes. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that facet, so yeah, I'll crack on and get the other ones done, and then we're almost done. So now what I'm doing, I've got all the facets in, and just having a look at places like that where I've still got a little bit of pencil mark on, and just trying very gingerly just working those out like that. We've got still the arrow on, the roughing. The last, or the second to last step is now to put in that chamfer on the end. So I like my knives at 13 centimeters long. So I'll take that out so I don't stab myself.
So is that the longest bit, 13 centimetres, or
yeah,
shortest?
13 at the longest. So I'm going to measure 13, just put a mark on it there, and just that's the kind of rough shape that we're going to go for. So what I'm going to do now is take it to the miter saw, chop it off. You can use a handsaw, I've got an electric one. Chop it off roughly, and then just with your sloyd knife, because you're going across grain, your draw knife and all that won't work amazingly, just sloyd knife and just sloyd it to round. So that's what we'll do now. Mark it all the way. So I've got the saw set up at an angle, not square. Gonna come in.
And obviously, needless to say, if people are using this, they've obviously got to know what they're doing.
Yeah, because I've got a nice juicy scar from not knowing what I was doing with this. So just checking, and then so that's a rough, and then yeah, getting a sloyd knife and just aiming for that curve there.
So you're basically just chamfering the edges now, yeah?
Well, no, at the moment it's straight. We want a curve like that on it.
Ah, okay, right.
So I'm just taking the corners off really. Once that curve is in it, I will then start chamfering it. But yeah, at the moment. And yeah, since it's quite dry ash and I'm going across the end grain, it's not the easiest to carve. So yeah, it's just something you've got to take your time with and be careful with. And you'll need a sharp knife. If you're struggling with this, maybe your knives are blunt and I don't know, it's not working. Since it's not an awful lot, you could always put it in a vise and take a file to it and just round it over that way. So yeah, you can see that it's starting to come in. So taking one corner off, you don't work in little bits, like you create one flat, then you create two flats, and then bisecting there all the time. So you can see that angle there, and once I've got that a bit lower, then I'll start cutting that line. A little bit more. And the other thing to bear in mind is you might notice it from here. Now I'm holding it an awful lot. It's getting a bit grubby, so I've got grubby hands. So the fitting of the blade it can get a bit grubby. So I think I've heard lemon juice is a good way of getting rid of grub like that. And I think in the past I've used acetone, or you can get it to roughly finish and then just go over it with your spoke shave, sandpaper, scraper, anything like that. Get back to clean wood. So yeah, and now I'm going to start carving through that line. So you can see I've hit the line all along there, and now there's just a little bit more, which is where it's going to start getting a bit fun. I'm going to take off that sharp edge as well at 90 degrees, and otherwise we might get a bit of tear out on the grain. So I think we're more or less there with that curve. So the last step now is, if we left these edges here sharp, well, you can see how just from the knife they've gotten a bit frayed. So we just want to put some chamfers on all the way around, about 45 degrees. Careful not to tear it. So I'm cutting with a knife like that, not into it, but upwards, if that makes any sense. and that way we're just going to cut down on any kind of tear out. And it doesn't really matter how big your chamfers are, just as long as that they are there. On the ones that I do with the belt grinder, I can sometimes make them quite exaggerated. Since this angle here is quite obtuse, it doesn't necessarily need one, but for the sake of consistency, I'll put one in. So yeah, I've now broken that angle all along. Maybe just make it a little bit deeper. And if you can do it all in one cut as well, they'll look pretty nice that way. So the other thing is not to forget about is up at the business end as well. But these ones want to be just a little bit smaller, so they don't look too, they don't grab your attention too much. Right, there we are, the chamfers are off. So, last thing to do is put your dowel back in, blade back in, line it all up, and just have a look at it, and have a good look at it, think, oh, is there anything else I could do? Like, if there's any little bits, like there for example, there's a little bit of a fluffiness, you can either go over with the spoke shave or just some fine like 300-400 grit sandpaper or wet and dry. So I use the same wet and dry that I use for sharpening for there on my handles, because it's good stuff. It's sharp. And yeah, I'll just have a good look. If we're happy with it, if it's nice and straight down that way, which it is, and there's no alterations, we'll start gluing it in.
So you mentioned something about sanding a part of it.
Yeah, so if we struggled, because this bit is end grain, and you can see it's not quite so smooth and consistent as perhaps those facets are, because it's rounded, it's end grain, it's really difficult. So what I might do is, this is some 180 grit aluminium oxide sandpaper, and if it's rolled up it has enough, yeah, you don't need a block behind it. And I might just go over it and take those high spots, just rolling my hand with it. Just careful, I'm not rolling over too much. I mean, you don't have to do this. I mean, people might like the knife finish. But yeah, if the wood's not playing ball, sandpaper is, a lot of people, especially in the green woodworking community, turn their noses up at sandpaper because it's all about knife finish. But not everyone can get amazing finishes by knife, and it's a lot easier just to go over it with some sandpaper. And you can see already that bit is getting smooth. There's some high spots still on that side, so I'll get them. There's just that little bit there, a little bit at the back. That feels alright now. Keeping it tight. And the other thing is that you keep wanting to use sharp bits of your sandpaper. Something I was told about sandpaper is treat it like it's free, because it's going to take you 3 times as long if you keep trying to use the same blunt bit rather than just biting your tongue and just getting on with it with a new piece. So yeah, I think just a few high spots there. Yeah, I think so. All those rough marks from the knife are now all out. It's nice and rounded. I might want to go over the facets again. And something to also bear in mind with something that you might later go back to with knives. If you're using really coarse, like 60 grit, maybe lower sandpaper, and it's not super great quality, it can leave bits of glass or silica or whatever's in sandpaper in the wood, which will affect your blades. But something like this, it's quite high grit, it's not poor quality. I don't think I will be going over that with a knife, but it is something to bear in mind that you don't want to sand it and then go back to your knife. And yeah, if you're sanding these facets, to keep these nice and crisp, if I was to go over it with this, I'm going to lose those crisp facet lines. So what I'd want to do is put this on some sort of backing. It doesn't necessarily need to be glued down, like I could just put it down on a table flat. But if I was to hold it, it would conform to the shape of the handle and yeah, blend those edges in, which I don't necessarily want. But yeah, I'm quite happy with all the straight facets back round the chamfers, and yeah, I think it's ready to get glued up.
So Adam, what's left in the process now?
So we've shaped our handle, it all fits, it's all aligned well. The last step is to glue it together. So what I use on all of my knives is just standard 2-part epoxy. This is 30-minute stuff, so it sets fairly rapidly. I mean, it says it's 30 minutes, it starts going off and hardening before 30 minutes.
So quick question, why opt for the 30 minutes as opposed to the quicker ones, 5 minute, 10 minute?
Well, anything below that sets in panic, because 5 minutes, it's gone pretty hard in 5 minutes. So yeah, you could use it for one small job like this, you could do, but if anything goes wrong, such as your alignment's off, then you don't have much space or time to adjust it, whereas 30 minutes is just right, because anything longer than that, you're waiting around ages. And yeah, 30 minutes, I mean, after 30 minutes, an hour, it should be fairly set, especially if you just keep whatever you mixed it on, you can see when it's gone hard. So yeah, what I'm going to do is just mix the glue up, dab a little bit on here, because I don't want to put lots in there and then this, because you can see how it bridges the gap, there's no air gap. So if I was to fill this with glue and then put my dowel in, the air, it's not compressible, it's not, well, compressing it would be very hard, so it's going to want to push your dowel out. So the other thing is that once this is in there, you're never going to put an awful lot of force which is going to pull the blade out. So the glue there is just really to position it properly and keep it in the right spot, really. So you don't need to go, the glue is just a void filler, really. So once that's just got a little dab of glue on the bottom, I'm going to start scooping it in, put it in there, and then I'll know I've got enough glue in there when I put it in there and glue starts coming out the top. And then once I've got enough glue in there, I'm going to check that it's all aligned again properly, and then just leave it upright.
And so I think the final thing to kind of touch upon is your gloves, and that's not for a prostate exam.
No, isn't it?
Although that could be a bonus segment.
You lied to me, Zed.
Damn it, I know. Always lead you on with this.
I'm sure it says it's really, there's lots of toxic connotations, whatever. Basically, if you're using bare hands, you get glue on you. It's not great, and then you could start just spreading it all over your handle. I've also got this acetone, which is a solvent for the glue. So if you do get it on your handle, on your hands, a little bit of rag with acetone on, I mean, I'm going to use it to clean out the stuff that sprays out the top. So a little bit of rag, acetone, just wipe it off. Instead of acetone, you can also use surgical spirits, which I think is available in most pharmacies. That would work, because if you try cleaning up without some sort of solvent, it's fairly difficult. What you could do is let it dry so it's a bit tacky, and then you can cut it off with a knife. But the best way to do it is, whilst it's still liquid, still setting up, wipe it off with a bit of acetone. So we'll get to it. So I'll mix up the glue. So as I said, this glue is just a void filler. So this is 2-part epoxy. I'm not going to measure it out exactly. You could do if you wanted, if you got some. So this is just some scrap paper, by the way. So it's fairly viscous. You've got to be mindful of the temperature of when you're using this, because if it's really hot, it's going to set quicker. If it's really cold, it's going to be quite thick and not run. One way you can get it a bit runnier is by putting it in a hot water bath. But if you do that, you've got to be mindful that it is going to shorten the setup time for the glue. So if you get it too hot, it's going to harden fairly quickly. So just above room temperature, like 20 degrees or something like that, is what this glue likes. So I'm just doing it by eye. I'm not measuring it out. You can do, but it's a bit awkward to do. And if it doesn't set up completely, it doesn't matter. It will harden. It might still be a little bit tacky, say, but it's still going to hold your knife blade in there. So since this is 30-minute, I'm not going to spend absolutely ages mixing it. Maybe a minute or so. Just going around in swirls, using the tang of the knife as well, since that's going to be going in there. I mean, you could argue that the glue that's on the end of the knife is not going to be completely mixed, so you could use a mixing rod if you're a purist, but this is how I do all my knives, and it's not usually an issue. It isn't an issue. Right, there we are, just leave that there. So as I said, just a little bit, so I don't want it to block up the air, and then you just, in that little gap, I think I'll just push it in a bit further. There we are. Gives me a bit more to aim for. And then just prodding it in with the blade. It's going to get a bit messy, but that's what the acetone and paper towel is for. You can see that the dowel is fighting a little bit. It's wanting to come out a little bit. And this is a benefit of using this 30-minute stuff, because you're not racing to get it glued in. You can take your time with it. You can make sure it's all aligned properly. Yeah, there we are. That's there. So, yeah, so you can see how it's all a bit of a mess, but now I'm just going to, careful of the blade as well, because obviously it's sharp and you're putting your fingers near it. And then that is soiled. I don't want to use that bit, so I just, because if you use that bit again, you're just going to be spreading glue everywhere. So you want to be using a clean bit of rag every time. Yeah, I've got the bulk of it off. I'm also going to leave it pointing up as well, so the glue doesn't fall out. And then, yeah, just go around cleaning it. Check as well, because you might have touched some of the glue and got it on the blade or on the handle and not noticed. So I'm just checking, I've not done that. Got around, checking the edge as well, make sure that there's not any on there, there's not. And now the final stage is to make sure it's in the correct orientation and it's the right way. Having a look around it, making sure it's all good, it looks that way. And now you just want to leave it upright somewhere. I usually just put mine in a cardboard box out the way, but yeah, something like that, just lean it up on something. Although if there is a lot of slop in it that way, you've got to be careful. You probably want to rest it on the wood. You could put it in a vise, but the only thing you've got to bear in mind is that you're leaving a knife, very sharp tip, pointing up. So you've got to be mindful of where you put it. But yeah, that should be just fine there. And yeah, that'll be ready to go in an hour or so. So you want to give, although it is 30-minute epoxy, you want to be doubly sure it's ready to go.
So Adam, we've completed the first version of making and fitting a slide knife handle.
Yeah.
So now we're going to show an alternative method for doing this. So would you like to kind of talk through what the second method is going to be?
Yeah, so what we've just done is what I think people might find easier at home, but now we're going to do it the way that I typically do it in my workshop. So instead of using the split dowel method, what we're going to be doing is burning it in, which is where you drill a small hole in your handle blank, get your tang of your knife hot, and put your handle on it, it burns in, it fits exactly, so there's no slop or anything like that, and then we'll be using the belt grinder to shape the handle rather than knives. So other than the burning in, it's the same process, just different tools really. So yeah, the first step for burning in the tang is that we've got a smaller drill bit now, and it's just a bit bigger than the width of the tang. This tang is 2.5 mil, that drill bit is 4 mil, and I want to drill a hole in my bit of wood straight again, parallel with all sides of the bit of wood in the middle, and it's the same dimensions really as the bit of wood that we used earlier. They're 15 centimeters long, about 30 mil by 60 mil, and yeah, I'm going to drill my hole slap bang in the middle, the length of the tang. And again, you can use a hand drill to do this, but it'd be more accurate using your drill. So I'm just eyeballing it, making sure it's all straight. Just clearing that swarf off. that will do. So the next step is that we're going to put our blade in the vise and get that tang heated up. So here we're just using leg vise, a metal vise. I think if you use a wooden vise, you do run the risk of burning your vise or damaging it. So it's blade down and the tip isn't poking out, and I've also got the junction about the junction of the tang into the blade about 15mm poking out. So I get that in there tight. It's important, as it is, it's not going to mar the blade. If you tighten that up and then start moving the blade about, then it's going to mar and mark your blade, so you don't want that. Next step, the scale on the back of the tang. What you want when you're heating it up is to be able to see the temper colours, which is oxidation of the steel. That is not going to happen if there's scale. So what I do is just get a file and just file a bit of clean metal up this end. It doesn't matter there, this is where the temper colours are important. So just clear a bit so it's nice and shiny. And the other thing, so the blowtorch is just a standard matte gas torch. You can use smaller ones, but the thing is, you've got to put a lot of heat into it quickly. The faster you can heat up the tang, the better, because steel, in terms of metals especially, is a very poor heat conductor. So if you're using a very slow blowtorch, by the time the end of your tang's hot, the rest of the blade's going to be really hot and you're going to ruin the temper. If you're using something quick like this, by the time your tang's hot, the rest of the blade's going to be fine. So you want something hot. And the other thing is, when you're using it, all the waste heat that doesn't hit this is being scattered off into the atmosphere. So what I use is a bit of fire brick to act as insulation, but if you don't have a bit of fire brick, you can just use a bit of charred wood. That will act as an insulator as well. And it's remarkable how much of a difference just having a bit of wood, fire brick, whatever, behind there has. So before we start heating it up, you've got to make sure everything's to hand, everything, you know which way you're putting your handle on. So the hole's going that way. I think I'm going to have it, I'm not sure, I think that way. And you need to know where everything is, because the moment you take your torch off, it's cooling down. So once you take the torch off, you've got to go for it. So yeah, we'll start heating it up now. I'm going to start heating that up. Get that bit to, you don't want it too hot, because if it gets to like a orangey yellow, all of it, when you put your handle on, you're just going to bend the tang. So you want heat building up there, a bit reddish on that bit, and then you want to watch for temper colours. As soon as it starts getting bronzy, right there, put your handle on. And when you put your handle on, your wood is going to absorb all the heat that is in the tang, so you don't have to worry about, oh, the heat's going to bleed into the blade. As long as you put your handle on it properly, you're okay. So we'll get started. So I'm putting it at the end and then just stroking, like painting the heat up. You can see the temper colours going, they're getting closer. So I'm not going to put, I'm going to heat the end up, and the heat is just naturally going to bleed up there. We're almost there. I think we're about there. Very quickly line it up. As simple as that. I want to make sure that it's touching up there. If there's a gap or anything, you can hit it with a hammer. But that looks good.
That was really quick, you know.
Yeah, that's a benefit of burning in. It's not fiddly, it's nothing, it's just on. It's important though that once it does cool down a little bit, enough to suck the heat out, you can see how it's a bit of a challenge. So I'm just going to get something to hit it off with, because there's lots of oils and residues and things like that in there, and charred wood, and if you leave it on there and let it cool down completely, it's going to just almost glue itself in here, and it's going to be a faff to get off. So now it's been burnt in, there's charred material, all of that, so I'm just going to very lightly just file it clean. It doesn't have to be to clean metal, just enough that when I go, and you'll be able to see which way it goes up, because the back of the knife will have left an impression. So I'll just offer it up there, and there's a bit of a little gap, so I'm just going to file it a little bit more. And a sharp file, this is a fairly new file, is important here because scale blunts files fairly quickly, and it's quite hard as well. So yeah, a new file is, or a sharp file is always, makes this job easier. And I'll also just take those corners off.
And what was the purpose, once again, of grinding this down at this stage?
Right now it's just so it fits a bit easier, because right now it's a bit tight. By just filing it, there you are, you can see I've not taken tons off. It's not sloppy or anything like that. It just, there's lots of residues, and you can see the oil that's come out of the wood and left itself on there. So yeah, and just by filing it just helps it fit a bit nicer and cleaner. And yeah, that is your blade burnt into your handle, and I can try and move that, it's not going anywhere. So this is the main reason I like burning blades in, because it's fitted now. I can take that out, I can do whatever I want in terms of shaping with this, and when I put my blade back in, it's in the exact same position, so it's not fiddly. And when it comes to gluing in as well, I can put it in, all the glue, put it in there, and I don't have to worry about aligning it, any of that. I know it's going to go exactly where I want and going to be completely fine. So the next step now is, it follows in the same lines as what we were doing earlier. I'm going to draw some construction lines on there and take it to the belt grinder.
So Adam, with the kind of tang burnt in, obviously we're looking at the shape of the handle now.
Yeah.
Where would you like to begin?
So what you might notice is that there's some oily residue that came out. So all I've got here is some paper towel with some acetone, because if you don't get it off now, it'll probably harden up, and it gets a bit more difficult to get rid of. So just taking that off. Next step is marking it out just like before. So nice flat bit of wood, Sharpie, and just going to follow that line. I follow that line, and that's our basic handle. So what I use is my 2x72 inch belt grinder. This is 36 grit ceramic belt. For woodworking, in fact all of the belts I use are ceramic. Typically for woodworking you use aluminium oxide, which goes blunt very quickly. It's a lot cheaper than ceramic, a lot cheaper, but this ceramic belt with wood will basically never go blunt. It'll break eventually, but it won't go blunt. So they just last forever, whereas if it was aluminium oxide, it would it would go blunt. Obviously, day to day, whilst I'm using this, I will have a powered respirator, you see there, because wood dust, any dust that this kicks off really, you don't want to breathe. For the purpose of illustration, so I can talk to Zed, I won't be wearing it, but we do have powered extraction underneath it, so it will be getting the majority of the dust. But if you're using powered abrasives, or any abrasive really, it is a good idea to consider ventilation, respiration, all of that. Your lungs are very important. So what I'm going to do here is blade comes out, because you don't want, this has the ability, just like when you're using a draw knife, of damaging your blade. So you want to be using it, and then you can just grind a little bit, chuck it back in, see where you're at, take it out, grind a little bit more. So yeah, without further ado, let's get cracking. So what I like to do, come in from the side, rather than going on like that, take little bites. Not all the way. Fine down. So that is the front and the back roughed in. Since it's 36 grit and I'm going uphill in the grain, it's given it quite a rough texture, but I'm going to be going up the grit, so I'm not really that worried. So the next step now is to draw a centre line and do the sides. So I'm going to put it in a vise for that. Line up the ruler with the blade. Giving it a good look, and then measuring out 13 centimetres, 10 side, 10 up there, and at 13 centimetres I'm going to give it 12 12, and then join up those lines. Be a bit easier. Take that off. Another thing to point out is that if you are using machines, you can use a Sorby to do this, like Robert Sorby, a Pro Edge, and I used to. However, what I just did there would take about a day, so it's useful if you just saw the waste off, axe it off, whatever. But that is a very aggressive belt grinder, so I can just do it like this. So yeah, I'm now going to take those sides off, and then once it's to shape, I'll round off the bottom. So, in fact, yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. So yeah, do the sides next. So chuck the blade back in. So by now I'll be able to see where it's looking alright. See if it's still central. It is even. So the next step is to mark 13 and put that curve on it.
So this is the butt of the knife?
Yeah. And compared to using a knife, it's a lot easier. One thing to point out here is you can see if you press too hard on end grain, you'll burn it. And with the higher grits, aluminium oxide belts, ones that go blunt quickly, you do run the risk of burning. So you've got to consider belt speeds and how hard you're pressing, how big the surface area is. But yeah, it's burning just a little bit, but that's because I'm pressing quite hard to get through most of it. Once it's cooled down a little bit, I can just get back to it. So I've roughed it out now with a 36 grit. What I will do, I've changed the belt to 120 grit. We'll just flatten off all the surfaces and then we'll put the facets on. The timber has torn out a little bit there, but I think once it's faceted, it's going to be there, but it's not going to make a big issue of the things. It's a little beauty mark. So again, process is the same. Scribing the facets lines on at 5.6 mil. Turn it over. And then get the light on it right. I'm not being super tidy with this because they are just guidelines. Yeah, probably just leave that a little bit. So yeah, with 120, just be careful. Wasn't quite expecting that strip to come out, but still a knife handle. So that is a 120 grit finish. This is how I typically finish my knife handles. You can go up all the way to like 1000 grit. It's personal preference now. But I think for this, I'll leave it at this. But what I do next is polish it on the mop. I can't tell you exactly what it is that I use because honestly I have forgotten, but it's basically I think wood turners use it for polishing. It is ideally meant for high grit finish wood, like 1000 grit, and it does give it a really nice sheen, but it still works on low grit, as you'll see. Careful not to put it into it as well, otherwise it'll ping off. I mean, you can see the difference if you get the light on it, how that's nice smooth polish and that's still raw. And yeah, that's your finished handle. I mean, to say it's only 120 grit, it's pretty smooth. I mean, have a feel of that.
Oh, crikey. Wow.
So yeah, this is now ready for the blade to be glued in, and yeah, there we are. But it's a nice beauty mark. But yeah, for day-to-day use, the only thing it's going to do is attract like dirt. So I'm not worried about it. Obviously, I won't sell it, but for this purpose, it'll do. And yeah, you can see. All I do now is fill that, like before, until it's to the surface with glue, and then just put that in there, leave it upright for about half an hour, and then it's ready to go. So yeah, that's typically how I make my handles here. So the glue has set now, and it's time to put a finish on the wood. I've just cleaned out some of the grubbiness with a bit of acetone, and I've got a selection of oils out here. Typically you can use boiled linseed oil, that's good. This is not the kind, the food grade one that you'd use on your spoons. This is, it's got hardeners in, so it sets a bit thicker and quicker. Another thing that I've recently started using is Rubio Monocoat, plus 2C, and it's 2-part. It's not the cheapest. It's and it's a bit of a faff because it's 2-part. You've got to mix it. You've got to mix it properly, but it is very nice. It gives it a nice colour, nice thickness. It sets well. But a cheaper and easier alternative is something that I've made, which is just, I think it's a 1-to-1-to-1 mixture of beeswax. I think typically use tung oil, but I think I may have used boiled linseed oil in this, and then terps to thin down the beeswax, and it makes a paste which you can just rub on. So this is what we're going to be using, and applying it is as simple as just getting a little bit on a bit of paper towel and just rubbing it in and over. And I feel like I've said this a billion times, but again, being careful. Since you're rubbing, it's not out of realms to a realm possibility to slide over the blade. So I'm just constantly thinking I don't want to slice my finger open on that. And yeah, it's just rubbing it all over, and then if I'm running out a little bit, putting a bit more. There we go. So if you put too much on, you can always just buff it off later. Putting quite a bit on the end grain because it'll soak it up. Right. Then once I feel like I've got everywhere, I'll just, with the whole towel, just give it a good so you don't want a thick layer of this on. And the terps in the solution is going to evaporate out and the beeswax will harden. So at the moment it's a bit pasty, it's a bit tacky, but give it a few hours, it'll harden up. And yeah, that's basically the finished article. Yeah, something I just forgot to mention is that oily rags, don't put them in the bin, take them outside and burn them, because especially with oils which have hardeners in and set quickly, it's all exothermic, heats up quickly, and the rags can spontaneously combust. It sounds ridiculous, but it does happen. So yeah, don't put oily rags in the bin, take them outside and burn them. So that's what's happening now.
So there you have it, my friends. That is a wrap for this video. Adam,
You're very welcome.
thank you so much. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So there's one thing I do want to ask Adam, actually on camera. We spoke about a little bit, but I need to clarify. Is this the first video you've done in relation to your knife making and ash and iron? A YouTube video?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Go on, check that out. And also, it's the first time he's teaching on camera as well. It's not an easy thing, you know. Bloke like me, the way I look, shoving a camera in your face and saying, act natural and talk, right? So it's not easy. But in all seriousness, you've done really, really well.
Ah, thank you.
I genuinely learnt a lot.
Yeah.
You know, filming your process, no matter how many sorts of videos that I film, I'm always learning, and it's been really, really nice to document Adam's process. I need to stress something, he didn't need to share this, right? But as we kind of spoke, we have been speaking for quite a while about doing a collaboration, and Adam was just saying, you know what, I just want to show everything. You know, if I can help even just one person out there, that it will make it all worthwhile. So I really do want to thank you. You're very kind. A few kind of things to kind of recap on as we mentioned at the very beginning of this video. Number one, once again, this video is a long video, but as you see, there was a lot to cover. We really wanted to go all in. And, you know, and Adam was just driven to say, right, let me show every variation possible to help you out there. So to help facilitate that, once again, this entire video has been broken down into all the different chapters. You can scroll along the timeline, or all the chapters are marked out in the description below this video. On the left-hand side are the corresponding times. If you click on those times, YouTube has a very cool feature. The video will jump straight to that section without you having to manually scroll through. The idea with this video and with the chapters is that it helps you moving forward to use this video with Adam's teaching and guidance, to use this video as a teaching aid for you. But the idea is that you use, you know, obviously safely, but you use everything that Adam has shown in this video and for you to try this at home. Now, the second thing I mentioned at the very beginning of this video is that I'm going to put links below to Adam's Instagram. He's very kind of active on there. It will mean the world to me that if you gain any value from this video whatsoever, is to check out Adam using the link below, his Instagram, and give him a follow. Do you know what? On my videos, I don't even ask people to subscribe, right? And all I'll ask is if you get any value from this video whatsoever, is to show the love to Adam, you know, for taking a lot of time out, you know, in order for me to document his process here in his workshop in Leeds. So the other thing I want to kind of talk about, and actually I can kind of bring Adam in on this, is as we mentioned at the very beginning of throughout this video, all the blades that he's kind of demonstrated and shown in this video, he makes and he supplies himself. So what is the process for that? If people are watching and they want to buy the blade, just the blade alone for themselves, and or they want to buy the finished kind of blade with a handle, what is the process for that? What do people do?
So I make everything in batches and upload it to my website. About once every month, really, I upload to my website. I don't do made-to-order things, so it's just keep checking my website. The link is on to that on my Instagram page, and yeah, every time I have something new to sell, I'll put it on my Instagram, put links. Yeah, if you want to buy something, the website's the place to go.
So you sell the blades and you sell the finished articles, and basically whatever is on your website is what you're selling, basically. Another thing to kind of touch upon that and moving on from that is Adam is always kind of innovating and bringing in new ranges and different things within his kind of product range as a whole. So I'd advise you checking back on his website on a regular basis, you know, to see the different things he has going on. Because like I said, even though what we've shown in this video is what he's doing at this moment in time, you know, by the time you're watching this and as you move forward, he's always going to be innovating and bringing new products in and new items and so forth. So it's, you know, I'd advise checking back on his website periodically to see the different things that, you know, he has going on. With that being said and done, if people do have any questions about things you've shown in this video and your products, etc., in general, is it okay if people reach out to you either on Instagram or your website?
Yeah, definitely. I fairly pronto getting back to people. Sometimes I can go to bed instead.
That was priorities.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, any messages, I definitely will get back to you and be as helpful as I can be.
One of the final things I do want to stress is something I should have mentioned at the very, very beginning of this video is everything demonstrated, and it's kind of a two-part thing actually. Number one, everything that Adam has demonstrated throughout this video is his current process at this moment in time. He's not saying it's the only way or the best way, it's what works for him right here, right now. He'll constantly be innovating and experimenting, as a lot of makers always do, but I do need to stress that is in no way, shape or form is Adam insinuating at any point in this video that this is the only way or the best way to do it. I mean, would I be right in saying that was, you know, it's kind of important to stress that?
No, everyone else is, because my way is the best. Yeah, you're right, yeah.
You know, it's very important, but sometimes it can be misconstrued that, oh, this is the best way. It's not. It's what works for him in this moment in time. Yeah. But also it's important, and this is kind of a bit of advice to you, if you're a maker of any way, shape or form, in any form of discipline, that you're always continuing and innovating and developing and growing, right, and improving. So I wanted to stress that. And finally, I wanted to stress once again, and we've stressed this throughout the video, is if you do replicate anything that Adam has advised and suggested in this video, take a lot of precaution and a lot of care. If in doubt, don't do it. Use a safer option, okay? Very, very important we get that out there. But nonetheless, with that being said, give it a go, right? Go out there. It's not as difficult as it looks. Yes, it takes a lot of practice and there will be some, you know, there's no doubt, even in your journey, you probably learned through a lot of mistakes.
My first knife handles were awful. I will not deny that. My first knife handles were awful. So yeah, it's taken a lot of attempts to get to where they are today, and I've still got a long way to go with them. But yeah, it's easy. It still happens to me to have the first go at something and it be rubbish. It's not until you've done it like 10, 20 times that it gets all right. So yeah, keep at it.
And one thing I do want to ask from you also, aside from giving Adam a follow on Instagram, is we've shown a lot of stuff in this video. If there's things you want Adam to expand upon in a potential future video, let us know in the description below. We're kind of brainstorming at the moment, other things we may possibly be able to do in the future. So if there's any ideas you have based on what Adam has demonstrated and talked about in this video, do let us know in the comment section below. So those that are watching who are considering giving it a go, making their own handle, or are about to do it, obviously you've gone through the entire process in this video, but what is any last bits of advice or a piece of advice that you would give to those watching?
Don't do it, buy mine instead. Burning is the way. It sounds scary, it seems scary, burning in is the way. I think that's the one thing I'd say to someone.
There you go, man. So Adam, a sincere thank you once again.
You're very welcome.
Guys, really do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you've watched all the way up until the end, we really do appreciate that, and we hope you got a lot of value from this video, or at least learn one or two things, right, depending on kind of, you know, how much knowledge you have on this particular given topic. So there you go, guys, that is a wrap for this video. Links to everything that we discussed are down below in the description. Any questions or queries, I'm going to put links to Adam's Instagram and website. You can contact him through there, and like I said, if you're getting any value from this video whatsoever, you know, all I ask is that you head over to his Instagram, Ashworth, and you give him a follow. So until the next installment of a Z Outdoors video, I shall see you then. And in the meanwhile, I hope whatever you're doing, you have a blessed day, a blessed week ahead. From Adam Ashworth of Ash and Iron and myself, Z Outdoors, peace out.